50-year mortgages, 15-year car loans, $2,000 stimulus checks, 600,000 Chinese students, more H-1B visas, more green cards. We're starting to figure out just how badly the Trump administration really needed to have Charlie Kirk in the room. We're going to be talking about that, as well as who could have possibly guessed this would happen. It's almost like it's the most obvious thing in the entire world. The New Hampshire transgender former lawmaker has been arrested for child porn. Sydney Sweeney has gone viral. There's a lot to talk about. It's a big show today. My name is Victor Nieves. This is the Victor Nieves Show. And before we jump into the meat and taters, as always, I want to start off the best way that I know how. It's by taking just a second to give glory and honor to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for the tremendous, the unearned, the undeserved blessings that I have enjoyed in my life. Let's start off today, as we dive into it, with the 50-year mortgage. Now, when this first came out, people were scratching their heads. They're thinking, okay, I had to have misunderstood. I misread. What are you talking about? A 50-year mortgage? For a little bit of context here, the average age now in the United States of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old. 40. 40 years old. The life expectancy of an average American is not 90 years old, meaning if you are 40 years old and you buy your first home, the odds are incredibly high you will die before you can pay that house off. You will live your entire life as a debt slave renting your home. This is a horrible, a profoundly terrible idea. And it's not as simple as you may think, because for one, there's a very sinister side of this. And that is, well, the banks are going to be getting it. Not only will you be renting your house, essentially, from the bank for your entire life with no hope of ever paying it off, basically, because you're going to die before you can pay it off. But when you do die, who's going to pay it off? It's going to go back to the bank. You're going to have this, that you will pay an unbelievable amount of interest. By the way, when you do the math on it, say it's like a $500,000 house, you put a 7% interest rate, a 30-year mortgage versus a 50-year mortgage, the monthly payment difference. Dave Ramsey, I can only imagine, poor Dave Ramsey, he's probably having a stroke over all this. The monthly payment difference on your mortgage is like $150. It's not a huge difference. I mean, so there's that insofar as it doesn't even make that, like, who's this going to open the door to? They're saying it's going to open the door to a lot of people, but I'm thinking if you could pay the 50-year mortgage, you might as well do the 30-year mortgage for $150 more a month, because at the end of it, when you pay off a $500,000 house at 7% interest for 30 years, you end up paying like an extra $200,000 or $300,000. It's a pretty significant amount. You pay a lot more money when you pay it off over 30 years. When you do it over 50 years, it's like double. You pay like double the amount of money that you would have paid if you did a 30-year mortgage. So just from a basic financial perspective, this is a horrible, I mean, this is like a catastrophically stupid idea to accept a 50-year mortgage. Now, I think most people agree with that. I think most people have come around to kind of accepting that you probably shouldn't be the one to cash in on a 50-year mortgage and then rent your house from the bank. You know, it's even worse than renting because you pay the maintenance. At least whenever I was, like, I'm a homeowner right now. When I was renting, we got hit with a hurricane. And I remember sitting there in my living room of my apartment, and I'm thinking, hey, kind of sounds like there's somebody out here throwing rocks at my window, because it was just so much, you know, getting hit with all this stuff. At least I'm a renter. If the roof comes off, you know, I don't have to pay to get a new roof. Now that I own a home, every time there's a slight rainstorm, I'm over here like, oh no, hopefully there's no leaks. If you're on a 50-year mortgage and you bought your house at 50, you're going to die before you pay it off, more than likely. I don't want to speak ill of you, but you're probably going to die before you pay it off. When the storm comes and your roof gets messed up, now you're paying a $9,000 deductible to get your roof replaced. And you're still you're renting the home. It's like renting, but you pay when the AC goes out. Renting, but you pay when the hot water heater goes out. Renting, but you pay when the roof. It's like, why would you do? Please don't do it. So this is my unsolicited financial advice. If the 50-year mortgage comes to fruition, please, for the love of all things holy, do not take out a 50-year mortgage. That is a terrible, terrible idea. But there's going to be people who say, okay, Victor, I understand you don't like it. I understand the Dave Ramsey case. I understand why it might not be, you know, the best financial decision for me and my family. Why do you care? Why do you care if somebody else has a 50-year mortgage? Well, for one, just like how the 30-year mortgage became the standard, the 50-year mortgage will become the standard. So it's going to be something that impacts a tremendous number of people. And just because there are those who will self-subject to usury and ridiculous interest rates, that doesn't mean that we should make it easier for banks to prey upon people, because that's what would happen. And so for one thing, even if it doesn't impact me, like even if I'm smart enough to never take out a 50-year loan, I don't want my countrymen to be debt slaves for the rest of their life. Not to seem like some sort of a hippie or a liberal or anything. I do actually care about my neighbors. I want what's best for them, and what's best for them is not to have a 50-year mortgage. That's completely insane. But even taking taking that out of the equation, this isn't going to be a situation where it's in a void. This isn't going to be a thing where you can introduce 50-year loans and have no consequence. They're saying that this is going to dramatically increase the number of people who have access to buying a house. In and of itself, that's a good thing. That's the goal. We want to increase the number of people who have access to buying a house, but we have a really big issue because the proposal of 50-year mortgages say that's going to introduce more buyers to the market. Okay, so now you have an increase of demand without changing the supply. And it doesn't take a brilliant economist to understand that dramatically increasing the demand without increasing the supply results in increased prices, tremendous increase in prices. What we need to do, for one, is kick about 40 million illegal aliens out of our country, because that's going to free up a lot of homes. So then you're going to have a lot more young people in their 20s who can buy a house, or who can get an apartment, or who can live somewhere with a roof over their head without having to compete with foreigners. Maybe we stop having BlackRock and these massive corporations buying single-family housing. That's insane. We should never allow that. That's like suicidal. You have a whole bunch of it's the boomer generation largely who are selling their houses to BlackRock, and then BlackRock is doing crazy stuff with it. It's really throwing off the housing market there. So that's one thing. The other thing is, though, we're not building enough houses, and so I'm not proposing a Keynesian style like building of the Hoover Dam, where we're going to say, the government's going to pay to build these houses. If they do that, don't buy a government built house. You think the big builders, like you think KB Builders are bad, or any of these other ones, don't be buying a government built house. You will regret that. They haven't handled anything else well. I don't know why they would do good building a home. You'd be living in it, and the whole thing would just fall in on you one day. But anyway, if we increase the number of people who have access to buying a house without increasing the number of available houses on the market, we're going to have a problem. So to those of you who might say, why do you care, Victor, if we introduce the 50-year mortgage? Because I'm in the market too. You're in the market. Your kids, your grandkids, people that you love and care about, they're going to be in the market to buy a home as well. And if we're looking for actual solutions, we shouldn't do this thing. It's the left is very guilty of this very, very often. And my hope would be that the right does not become equally guilty of the very same thing, where we recognize that there is a problem. In this case, it's the housing market. But to make maybe a parallel, we'll say there is a problem in this country with people shooting each other. Okay, we have 40,000 firearm-related deaths every year. About 20,000 of those are homicides, and people will correctly identify 20,000 Americans dying. That is an issue. I'm not going to make little of 20,000 people. That's 20,000 families, etc. And so we do have a legitimate issue. We can agree upon the fact that there's a legitimate issue, but if we don't have a real solution, we have a busy work kind of a proposal where we have to do something, so we're just gonna do this, and then we can tell people that we at least tried. Well, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And you could say, well, we need to introduce a 50-year mortgage because we have good intentions with it. I don't care. I'm actually not particularly interested in what your intentions are. And by the way, this proposal from the administration, now at the time of recording, this is not something that's active. This is not something that they're currently doing. But at the time of recording, this proposal has been trashed. I mean, really trashed. Young people are very mad about this. Pretty much everybody, actually, is very, very mad about this. To go along with it, by the way, not to beat a dead horse with all this, but to go along with it, the other issue that we have is the Trump administration is now considering rolling out not just the 50-year mortgage, but a 15-year car loan. I'm praying for Dave Ramsey because I don't know that his heart might not be able to take this. 15-year car loans? Brother, seriously? A 15-year car loan. Can you imagine the Nissan Altimas, what they're about to do with the Nissan Altima? You're going to see these Nissans driving around 40% APR for 15 years, zero down, no credit. Oh my gosh. If you buy a car, again, back to our unsolicited financial advice, I know I don't have it all together, but I have a very good credit score and I'm a homeowner at 26, which puts me in a rare category. If you're buying a car on a 15-year car loan, you will be upside down on that car. You will owe more money than the actual value of the car. Meaning, if you were to sell the car, you would still owe money. You could sell the car for the very best deal you could possibly get, and you couldn't pay off the loan, meaning you'd be upside down. There is no car that you're not going to be upside down on within 15 years. That is insane. That is predatory. That is not a good, and I'm not saying Trump himself is being predatory, but somebody is whispering into his ears and they need to be ignored. All right, now that we have addressed the mortgage situation, the car loan situation, let's move on to another crazy thing that the administration is doing. And by the way, let me preface before we keep going on, this is going to be the theme of today's show. I don't mean to just be poo-pooing on the Trump administration. I'm not a panikin. I'm not one of those ravenous, ridiculous, never Trump haters. By the way, if you're questioning that, I have a very live, like 6 years of public content of me working very hard toward getting President Trump elected. Hundreds of millions of views, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of me just pouring into the Trump administration, trying to get him elected, supporting what he does, defending him at every possible turn. The Epstein situation, if you haven't heard my take on that, I did a whole podcast on it. That was the end of me considering myself on the chugga chugga choo choo MAGA train. I got off. That was my stop. I got off the train. I still support much of what the administration has done, and I wish him all of the best. I pray for President Trump. We should all pray for President Trump. I want him to do well. His first term was exceptional. There are things in his second term that he has done that are very good. I'm very appreciative of. For example, the deportations, about 2 million thus far. We have essentially nobody crossing the southern border, which is fantastic. So I'm not just trying to be a poo-pooer on President Trump, and I have the track record and the credentials and the proof of support for a very long time. I'm not somebody who's ever flip-flopped on him. I haven't been a fair weather fan. I wasn't one of these people who endorsed Ron DeSantis or something like that in the 2024 primaries. I was a loyal Trump guy, and I'm telling you right now, the loyal Trump people are turning. The loyal Trump people are getting spit in the face. And this is the theme, kind of with a bow on it, is the administration is lost without Charlie. That's the way that I'm interpreting this right now. It's 2 months out, a little over 2 months out since Charlie Kirk was murdered. And the administration is like falling apart. I don't know what's going on. We all knew that Charlie had a line in with the Oval, but I don't know that any of us realized just quite how significant it was. And Charlie had this amazing ability within the coalition to keep people together, but also to keep the Trump administration from doing suicidal and stupid things, which is kind of what they've been doing over the last while. And if you think I'm an outlier on this, I am not. I promise you, young men, all of the young men that I speak to, the young generation, not just even the men, young people in general, but particularly young men, are turning on the Trump administration. And it's not the fault of the young men. It's the fault of the Trump administration. We're getting a lot of tweets. We're getting a lot of truth socials. We're getting edgy memes, and we're getting cool posts from, I don't know, DHS and the FBI and whatever. But I'm not seeing a lot of action, right? And an example of this is President Trump put out a thing, or maybe Eric Trump did, but it was a picture of him and Trump where it's the portraits at the White House, and you go one after another, and Trump replaced Joe Biden's portrait with the pen, the auto pen. And it's a funny joke. I mean, we're happy about it. But I'm kind of tired of seeing jokes. Arrest him. Arrest somebody. Don't sit here and, the whole, like the 2016 line, you'd be in jail. Like, that was cool, but okay, do it. I mean, that's why we elected you. We elected you because you promised to be an outsider. You were going to bring the real change. You weren't going to be one of these people that became subservient to mega donors or foreign interests. You were going to put the American people first. You were going to go and take names. You were going to actually make a difference. And right now I'm seeing a lot of memes. I understand he's only a year into the administration. I don't want to be an unreasonable critic. But I'm tired of seeing the memes. Maybe at this point you stay down till you're up. Maybe at this point we don't continue making the edgy, because it's like, what's the benefit of this? All you're doing is riling up half the country, and I'm all for riling up half the country, but let's have some results. Let's bring something to the table. Go and arrest somebody. I want to see these people perp walked. It's not like there's an absence of crime. I mean, They nearly put you in jail for the rest of your life, President Trump. I expected, you said it was going to be our retribution, our vengeance. Where is that vengeance energy? And there's people in the administration, Stephen Mill. I'm not trying to poo-poo on the Trump administration, but we have to give feedback because I do think that Trump does listen to people. He certainly, it appears, listened to Charlie Kirk. We have to give productive, respectful criticism where criticism is due. And the last couple of months, there has been no shortage of criticism due. So not only the mortgage stuff, he's now talking about $2,000 stimulus checks. Folks, let me just shoot you straight. If Joe Biden, which, I mean, he did kind of do this, and I have the record of me doing radio over the last several years where I accused Joe Biden of trying to bribe people, trying to pay young people off and pay for their student loans and whatever it might would be, either before the midterms, before a presidential election. It's bribery. You're trying to bribe people. President Trump, I mean, we're going into the midterms and his favorability is tanking. It just is. It's not me saying it, but that's the stats are bearing it out. Rasmussen has done quite a few polls on this that point to the same thing that I'm feeling. It's in the air. It's palpable. Young people especially are turning away from President Trump, not because he's too far right, but because he's not doing the right-wing things that he said he was going to do. Stimulus checks. Before a midterm election, because we're already in midterm season, whether you like it or not, we're getting into it. By the time any kind of a stimmy check would roll out, he's saying that these are going to be from the tariffs. And listen, I appreciate the tariffs. I'm not somebody who's flip-flopping on that. I think that the concept behind the tariff protocol is good. I think it's bringing in money. We've already seen that it's brought in like hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars of investment. I think that there's a place for protectionist economic policy. And I think that we're seeing it, and I don't criticize that, but the idea is that he's going to take money from the tariffs and send it to the American people. Now, listen, I'm not a fan of getting taxed. If we could get rid of the income tax, that would be fantastic. I'm a huge fan of getting massive tax cuts and rebates, and anytime the government wants to send me my own money back, like, I'm happy to take it. This is not that. This is something distinct, and there's something very bad about it. There is a precedent that is very wicked about this. And I'm not saying Trump himself is wicked, but the idea that going into a midterm election, we would just hand the American people $2,000 checks is insanity. That's not how a free nation works. In fact, it's how a free nation dies. We always complain about the welfare state. We always complain about how, oh, these young people, they don't want to, they look for a handout. They don't want to work. They want the government to provide for them. Yeah, well, how do you think they get that idea? Stimulus checks and the welfare state and giving it to people who aren't willing to work. Why would we give, even if this is only for people who are working? By the way, Trump is saying it's going to be people who are not high income earners. So it's going to be like 100,000 and below. So now you have like a socialist aspect of this too. Like, if you're going to give it to the American people, don't pick winners and losers. There's a cascading set of errors that we're seeing play out from the Trump administration here with the $2,000 stimulus concept. If you're going to do this, you just send it to everybody. What's this idea of the government now is not only going to send people money, but we're going to pick winners and losers, and we're going to decide, hey, if you've been a very productive member of society, if you've been an innovator, if you've been a hard worker, tough luck, you don't get it. But the guy who, is working half as hard as you, he's going to get rewarded by the federal government with a $2,000 stimulus check peeled off of the tariffs, which is obviously, it's like the old Caesars. It's what the old Roman emperors used to do. The people are unhappy, give them games. Okay, the people are unhappy, give them stimulus checks. Trump did it in COVID. Biden did it to a much larger note in COVID. And now Trump's going to bring it back again. Where does this stop? Are we just going to continue? Is this going to be something that happens where we just continue? The Republican Party? Are we now the party of stimulus checks? I'm not in favor of that. I didn't ask for that. How about you get rid of the income tax? How about you pay off our national debt, $40 trillion? How about you invest it into the United States? How about you do anything other than create and expand the welfare state or send our money to foreign nations? We have plenty of things that we need to be doing domestically, and sending out stimulus checks is insane. That's not what we need to be doing. Well, let's keep the ball rolling here as we talk about some of the things that the Trump administration needs to have a serious course correction on. And by the way, if you're listening, let me know. Am I preaching to the wrong audience here, or are you guys feeling the same thing that I'm feeling? Because Everybody that I've spoken to, everybody that I'm talking to, what I see from the base of the Republican Party is people are very mad about this. Anyway, the next thing I want to talk about is 600,000 Chinese students. President Trump did this crazy interview with, I think it was Laura Ingraham. And credit to Laura, she pushed back on a lot of these topics herself. She was kind of recognizing the administration is really heading in a very deeply unpopular direction. She asked about the Chinese students. The Trump administration has announced that they plan to import 600,000, you heard that number correctly, 600,000 Chinese students to come to American universities. And American young people don't like this. To explain why, if you have 600,000 foreign students at these universities can only have so many people. Classes fill up. You can only have so many students at these colleges, okay? They're competitive. When you have 600,000 foreigners coming to American colleges, that means there are 600,000 seats filled by a foreign student that could have been filled by an American student. And everybody understands that there's, in many cases, a lot of preference that's given to these foreign students because, and Trump lined this out correctly, I don't agree with it as a justification, but he correctly identified that these foreign students are paying about 2 times as much as the American students, the domestic students. So if you're a university, who are you going to bring in? Are you going to bring in the guy that's going to pay you half as much as the other one? Or are you going to bring in, the Chinese students? And so for every one of these young people, I mean, some of the stuff we've talked about today, they can't buy a home. They can't find a good job. What, now they're not even going to be able to go to university, which they've been lectured and grandstanded. They've been told that they have to go to university, otherwise they're never going to be able to get a good job, and then they're never going to be able to, provide for their family. Young people aren't having children. Our country is way below replacement rate. We're having 1.6 babies per woman, which is significantly below the 2.1 needed in order to replace our current population. That's a huge issue. We have demographic collapse on the horizon. It's not good, and we're importing 600,000 of these Chinese students when pressed on it, because Laura Ingraham says, how is that MAGA? How is that America first in any capacity to bring in hundreds of thousands, nearly 1 million Chinese students, when we know, by the way, real quick, we know that many of these Chinese students have been exposed as spies. They've been bringing in bioweapons and toxins, and they've been literally spying on us. 600,000? No, just from a national security perspective, I'm not really interested in having 600,000 Chinese students, but also from the perspective of young people, getting back to that, young people can't buy a home. They feel like they've been locked out of the American dream. They feel like the older generations got to have something that they're never going to be able to have, because Gen Z is basically the first generation to really, truly be handed an economy that was worse than what their parents had. And it is legitimately, I understand there's people who say, well, Gen Z just doesn't want to work. There may be a certain level of truth to that. But the economy for young people right now is exponentially worse than it was for our parents at our age, and it's unbelievably worse than it was for our grandparents. And if the Republican Party does not understand that, we will lose every single election. This isn't a matter of opinion. This isn't something where the older generations are going to lecture and finger wag and scold the young people and say, well, you just need to work harder, you just need to do this, you just need to do that. That messaging will get you killed. Just for the record, you want to lose every election going forward as Gen Z becomes a primary voting demographic? I promise you, you will lose. Every single election that you have in the future, if you put up a candidate that lectures Gen Z about how they don't understand the economy and how back in my day we just would work extra and we would do this and we would do that, you don't understand. Look into the price adjusted for inflation and relative to income. Look at how expensive it is to rent an apartment today for young people versus renting an apartment in 1970. Look at the difference in home ownership. Look at the difference in virtually everything. Young people are really in a bad place right now. Our economy, and it's bearing down on young people who didn't get to have all of these crazy benefits. They didn't get some of the PPP loans or whatever during COVID. They didn't get to have the ability to refinance their house at a 2% interest rate. They're getting screwed. And all the while, our government is sending money to foreign nations and lecturing them about how they don't understand how things work. And it is true that young people oftentimes don't understand how things work, and there are young people that don't want to work hard enough, and there's young people who buy things that they don't need to be buying. But listen, the idea that the luxuries for young people are what's costing them the ability to buy a home is stupid. That's just not how it works. A $20 Netflix subscription is not going to change the fact that in order to buy a home, you need like 5 years of your income to pay for the price of the home. That's just not that, more than that, actually. I mean, the average price of a home right now is like, what, $300,000, and the median income is like $46,000. Good luck with that. I mean, good luck explaining how a $30 monthly, and I'm not saying everybody needs to be buying a $30 monthly, certainly not Netflix, but like, you understand what I'm saying? These small luxury purchases that back in the 70s were big purchases are not, it's inverted. That whole table has flipped, and there's a lot. We could give a whole show dedicated to the differences between the economy then and the economy now. But if we don't understand that, if we don't figure this out, we are screwed. We have strapped a bomb to our chest. Gen Z will not vote for you, and you can't say that nobody ever told you, because I'm telling you right now, if you try and lecture Gen Z about this, it won't be successful. And so anyways, Gen Z is looking at a very glim economic future. And you're bringing in 600,000 young people so they can't get jobs, they can't start a family, they can't even go to school. What the heck is Gen Z supposed to do? What are they, for real, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to just go out and dig ditches all day, every day? That's a real quality of life we're going to have there. Is that what young people are expected to do? And maybe if they would work hard. I say this as somebody who has worked hard. By the way, I am somebody who has run businesses. I'm currently a CEO right now. I'm currently, like, there's a lot of stuff that I currently do. I'm a homeowner. My wife has worked very hard. We have put in those hours. So it is absolutely possible to get ahead, but it's a very brutal thing. And not everybody has the skill set to do it. That's just a fact. Right now, a young man can't provide for a family by working in a factory. A young man can't go straight out of high school and provide for his family. Now, he can go into the trades, and that's a much better prospect than going into college, for the record. But that's a certain kind of person. There are some people who are just not cut out for trades. It's just true. I'm not saying that they couldn't learn to do it, but there are some people who are just really, that's not them. They're going to have a miserable, horrible life, and they're not going to be a good, like, you wouldn't want them to build your house. So it can't be everybody. Not everybody can be a plumber, but we're talking about low-skilled labor. Right now, the low-skilled labor is going to the H-1Bs, and it's going to the illegals. So young people can't go out of college or can't go out of high school and get a halfway decent paying job on a factory like people used to be able to do back when you could go work at the Chrysler plant and you could make a lot of money and you could provide for a family with no real higher education of any meaningful sort. That's been taken away from the gut of this country. I mean, if you're a young man living in semi-rural America, good luck. What are you going to do? What are you going to do for work? I mean, you can work in construction, you can work in the trades, or you can work at Burger King. Those are your prospects for many young millions and millions of young men right now are really stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so to have the administration come in on top of that and say, yeah, too bad. We're going to bring in 600,000 Chinese foreign students. That's not going to sit right. It's America first, and it's really America only. That's what's going to win. That's the only winning messaging strategy, is to actually focus on Americans and care about Americans in the way that you claim to care about them. And right now, the Trump administration, frankly, is doing a very poor job of walking the talk that they had given us for so long. Now, let's talk about H-1Bs, because that's a relevant thing, and it piggybacks on top of this. The H-1B situation really highlights the fact that young people are being told that Americans aren't good for anything. President Trump, in that same interview with Laura Ingraham, she asks about H-1Bs because young people aren't a big fan of this. You have these foreign workers who are coming in and getting paid like maybe 2/3 the wage of what Americans, so 33% less roughly than American workers, especially in these big booming industries, tech and all of this kind of stuff. You have these people from India, you have people from China, you have people from various different countries. They're coming in and they're basically, I don't want to say slave labor, they're kind of like indentured servitude, because whenever you come in as an H-1B, you don't get to leave that company. Like if you get an H-1B to work at Microsoft, you can't then go get a different job. Like you can't leave Microsoft and go somewhere else. You are here to work for Microsoft. So if you leave or get fired, you're out. You go back home. And so you have this very dangerous and somewhat predatory relationship between the employee and the employer. And so they're willing to work for grotesquely low wages. They also hire within their racial in-group. So you see this within cybersecurity, tech fields. You have Indians who come in and then they hire other Indians, and they really kind of like block out the native, like heritage Americans are not able to get in these fields. And so Laura Ingraham presses Trump on H-1B, and she says, hey, what are you doing? What's the strat with H-1B? Because President Trump back in 2016 correctly acknowledged that H-1B was predatory. He said that it was unfair and that it really, screws over the American worker. He was correct. And now he wants to bring in more H-1B visas, and he wants to bring in more green cards, and he wants to have Kristi Noem was just bragging about how we have more naturalizations than the previous administration. That's not a good thing. We need like a 50-year moratorium on all immigration. I don't want to be bringing in more people. The American people are suffering. The way to ease our suffering isn't to just dilute us in our own country and replace us with other people who are going to... That's not a government of the people, by the people, for the people. The United States Constitution says that it was written for our posterity, ourselves, and our posterity. So it should go to Americans. The focus for the American government should be on the American people. What a novel idea. So Laura Ingraham presses him. To her credit, once again, she presses President Trump. What are you doing with the H-1Bs? And he says, well, we need the talent. Laura Ingraham says, what do you mean we need the talent? We have talent right here. We have talent in the United States of America. What about the young men and women who are looking for jobs? They would work those jobs. They're talented, smart, young people. And President Trump says, no, we don't have the talent. Laura Ingraham says, we have talent in the United States. He says, no, we don't have the talent. We can't ship these. We can't just have somebody come straight into a job where they're building batteries or something. He gives that example. It's going to blow up or something because the American people are not competent enough. If Joe Biden said something like that, I would be off the wall. What's the word? Apoplectic? I would be apoplectic over that. I would be like throwing an absolute temper tantrum. And so when you see that young people are leaving support for President Trump, this is why. This is what we are feeling. This is what we are seeing. This is what we are experiencing. We were told in 2015, 2016, all the way up to the 2024 campaign that the forgotten men and women of America would be forgotten no longer. Well, we've been forgotten about again. That's the way that it comes across. We have been forgotten about once again. Young people are being replaced with Indian foreign H-1B visa holders. We're being replaced with more green card holders. This is how we get decimated in the midterms. If you want to know, and I'm an eternal optimist. I'm not a black pillar. I'm not one of these people who says, oh, it's too far gone. Nothing's ever going to get fixed. It's beyond correction. No, I don't believe in that at all. That's stupid. But if the midterm election was right now, we get destroyed. We get absolutely destroyed. And by the way, if the 2028 presidential election happens right now, we probably get destroyed. That's just the truth of it. And we're early into the administration. And again, I have to preface this so often and give this disclaimer so often throughout today's show, but I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to poo-poo on the administration. There are many things for which I'm very grateful. But right now, the trajectory that our country is on is not good, and the Republican Party is going to get destroyed. And frankly, if we don't change something, we are going to deserve to be destroyed. Well, my friend, we're now in the fourth and final segment of today's show. If you have enjoyed it thus far, make sure that you do me a solid, share this with somebody, whether you're watching today's episode will be on YouTube, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're watching, I don't know, maybe I'll upload it to X. Who knows? If you're watching on one of those, or if you're listening on a podcast platform, be sure to subscribe and leave a review and share it with somebody there. If you're one of my radio listeners back home in St. Louis, I love you guys. Tell people where they can listen. The Real Talk Radio Network. These are fantastic people, and I love you all. I miss you guys up there in St. Louis. Don't think I forgot about you. Hopefully you haven't forgotten about me just yet. Let's talk about the story of the transgender New Hampshire lawmaker. I got a lot of heat for this one. There's a really scummy guy on TikTok and Instagram. He follows me like a hawk, this guy. And he's always looking for a reason that he can make videos about me, content about me. And it's whatever. It brings eyeballs, and his audience hears, in my opinion, pretty compelling cases. But anyways, I made a video about this New Hampshire lawmaker who got arrested You guessed it. Who could have possibly imagined for child pornography involved in this freakish, disgusting? I mean, it is such gross. Who could have imagined the sexual deviant would be a sexual deviant? This guy and his, I guess you call it a boyfriend. I don't know. His intimate partner, who's also like some sort of a freak with this whole sexual stuff. The guy worked at a daycare. So we have two characters, just to make sure we understand which ones we're dealing with. We have a former New Hampshire lawmaker, an elected state representative, and his boyfriend, I guess, who worked at a daycare. So the boyfriend works at a daycare. There were 10,000 text messages between these two. A couple of freaks, these guys, where they're sending either pictures of naked children at the daycare. So imagine you send your kids to daycare. I know I have listeners who do. You have this freak degenerate who's dating a transgender person. It's probably time to pull your kid from that daycare. Just saying, okay? Let's recognize some patterns and protect ourselves accordingly whenever it comes to this kind of a thing. If you have a freak a grown man who's wearing a dress and is constantly fixated upon being around children, or you have a guy who's dating a transgender person who wants to be around children, no, don't expose yourself to that. Don't expose your children to that. The guy had been taking pictures. The kids were ages 3 to 5. And the daycare worker had been taking disgusting pictures, sexual pictures of these innocent children, scarring them for life, no doubt. And he was sending them to the transgender individual 10,000 text messages of either pictures or them describing what they would like to do, essentially to the children and their disgusting graphic sexual acts. Now, both of them have been charged. Hopefully, both of them will have millstones tied around their neck and be thrown into the ocean. That would be the biblical prescription. I doubt that our criminal justice system will allow that, though. That is my religious belief as to what ought to happen to people who victimize innocent children. Tie a millstone. The Bible actually says it would be better to have a millstone tied around your neck and to be thrown into the ocean than to cause one of the young ones to stumble. So taking these pictures of them and I can only imagine the abuse, the abuse that's involved. A millstone, 12-gauge shot. There's plenty of ways that we could handle this. I think we need to bring back the death penalty, like hanging. I don't know. I mean, there's no punishment too severe for people who would do this to a child. But are we supposed to pretend like we're surprised? That's the question. Are we supposed to pretend like this is some sort of a, wow, I can't believe that this would happen? A transgender individual would be a pedophile. A transgender individual would be preying upon innocent children. Who could have seen this one coming? Who could have predicted it? It's almost like sometimes it's the ones that you most expect because we have intuition, and I believe a lot of intuition comes from God. Not to say all of it. Don't go crazy or overboard with this. You can have some kooky positions if you think every gut feeling comes straight from God. But he did give us an intuition for a reason. We do have it, and we would be foolish to completely discard it. We would be equally foolish to just believe, the Bible also says the heart is above all things deceitful. So, have some balance in all of this. But when we see this, I don't know, man. I'm just telling you, I'm not letting my children be around transvestite men. If somebody has told me openly in front of the entire world that they're going to base their entire personality and their identity around a fetish, around a sexual perversion, around deviant, degenerate behavior, why would I ever let them around my child? And somebody's going to retort and say, but sometimes it's a pastor, but sometimes you have somebody that you wouldn't expect and they molested. Okay, yeah, that's true. Let's talk about stacking our deck to the best of our ability. Let's talk about maybe you don't you could say the same thing. Well, sometimes you're walking down the street and you get randomly shot by a nerd wearing glasses with a calculator in his left hand. Yeah, I'm sure that that's happened too. But at the same time, if I see somebody with 100 neck tattoos and a bunch of teardrop tattoos all over their face and they're holding an AK-47 walking down the street, yeah, maybe I'm going to move to the other side. Maybe I'm going to go somewhere else, turn around and leave. Maybe I'm not going to maybe let me just walk down the middle of downtown Detroit at 2 a.m. and just, oh, hey, everybody, how are y'all doing? Maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I shouldn't go walk around downtown East St. Louis in the middle of the night with my life savings. Maybe I should try and stack the deck in my benefit. So yes, of course, there's going to be people in the church or something that's tragic, that's horrible. By the way, same thing applies to them. Millstone around the neck, throw them in a lake. But whenever it comes, by the way, that's the government, not you as an individual. The government, because we, even from a Christian perspective, we do not have that authority. God gave government in Romans. We see this. God gave government the power to wield the sword against evildoers, not you and I as individuals. We're not biblically prescribed to be vigilantes. So just for the record, there's people getting sued lately for some crazy stuff. I'm just for legal purposes, I want everybody to understand it. When I say throw a millstone around their neck, throw them in the lake, I'm talking about the government should be the one that's doing that. That's the only just way to handle that. But anyways, how about we stack the deck and we stop pretending like people who have mental illnesses that revolve around sexual identity and sexual activity and this very deviant behavior. And maybe we stop pretending like that's just totally normal and that they should be in the presence of young children. It's just an idea. It's just pitching that out there. Now, before we run out of time, I want to talk about Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney, you wouldn't have thought, and I don't want to give like a ridiculous amount of airtime to Sydney Sweeney. I'm not saying that she's a role model, certainly not for young women. She should repent of many of the things that she's been involved in, movies and stuff like that. Not good. But she went viral recently. And I am a believer in giving flowers where flowers are due. And she's a big cultural icon because a lot of men are particularly fond of Sydney Sweeney. It's kind of, who is that one from Transformers? Megan Fox. She's like the modern day Megan Fox, where you can put those two pieces together. Anyway, Sydney Sweeney did the jeans ad. I'm sure you remember this. She's the famous lady who did the blonde girl. She did I think it was for like Wrangler jeans or Levi's or something like that, right? And so she said in that thing, she said like jeans she was making a pun, like your genetics and your blue jeans. She was kind of making a pun there, talking about how like your genes determine this, your genes determine that. And she's saying like Sydney Sweeney has good genes because, that's the whole point in the ad. Well, she was called a Nazi. She was called a fascist. She was called all sorts of horrific things. Poor Sydney Sweeney was. And she goes on an interview. And the interviewee is some weird, like, I don't know. I don't want to be too mean to this lady. Kind of like a weird androgynous, I don't know. She was like offering Sydney Sweeney the opportunity to, what's the name for it? The Japanese have that name for it, where they like Hadoku or something. They disembowel themselves. They take out a samurai sword and they like publicly kill themselves because of dishonor. They were offering Sydney Sweeney the opportunity. Like, would you like to throw yourself down upon the altar of wokeness and beg for the forgiveness of the left? Because how dare you participate in a blue jeans ad? And maybe you shouldn't be joking about how white people have good genes, or how, maybe like you as a white woman, how you have good genes, and that was like an insensitive joke. And President Trump retweeted you or like talked about your genes ad. And so she does this, it's like this slimy thing. She gets to this line, she's like, I'm just like trying to give you the opportunity, to like, would you like to disembowel yourself on the altar of wokeness? And I'm just like, like maybe I'm just like offering you the opportunity right now to like talk about whether or not you think that was like a bad decision. Yeah. And Sydney Sweeney has the perfect, and the only reason I'm talking about her and the only reason I'm talking about this interview is because she has the perfect response. Something so many people could learn so much. Who would have thought from Sydney Sweeney? She looks at this lady with like disgust. Like she just hits her with this blank stare, like, are you stupid? And she says, well, I think whenever there's a topic that I want people to hear about, they'll hear about it. No, I'm not going to take the opportunity to, grovel before you and beg for forgiveness because I talked about blue jeans. If I change my mind, if I want to tell, my audience, hey, guys, I thought about it. Maybe that was a little bit insensitive of me. I will do that. I don't need you to provide me the opportunity. Here's the noose. Would you like to hang yourself? Okay, guys, no. And I have seen so many people on the right who face the tiniest little bit of backlash for something completely benign, totally innocent, that they meant no harm on, they caused no harm on. And somebody comes to them and they're like, oh, you have to apologize for this. You have to, again, kill yourself on the altar of wokeness. And I see people time and time and time again, they do it. And they say, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I can't believe I would do this. Oh, I beg for your... No, stop it. Take the Sydney Sweeney approach. Look at them like that. Well, like they're dumb, because sometimes they are. And just say no. Anyways, that's all the time I have for you. Till next time, keep me in your prayers. Keep your country in your prayers. God bless.